Like, oh man, trying to adapt back to it.
Yeah, it's funny because we're finally getting some cooler weather here, but it's amazing how I'm finally starting to dial in the humidity when it's there and when it's not there. I'm sitting in the gym. I'm
Um,
looking at the thermometer on the wall, and we're at like 75 degrees, and I'm like, all right, yeah, I'm down. This is great. And then I'm like, it just doesn't feel like 75. It doesn't feel crisp relative to where it was before. Sure enough, I pull out my phone. It's 88% humidity. And I'm like,
mm,
how could the humidity be this high still? So we're still getting these Bohemian winds and this,
oh
you
man,
know, that wet air. And even at 75, it doesn't really feel that crispness, that dryness that you would get
yeah,
when you get more of that air from the jet stream, so to speak.
yeah. I remember it being pretty crisp. I was down there. Well, it was almost a year ago. It was
Yep.
yeah,
That was
we
in
just a week or two.
December.
I think very early December last year. Yeah,
Yeah,
well, I
that's
think
about the
literally.
time. That's about the time the winds shift, and we'll start getting westerly winds. Whereas not right, we're still getting that stuff from the east.
Mhm.
So we're getting that wet Bohemian air, for probably another couple weeks, and then it'll completely shift for 3 or 4 months, and then it'll shift back, and all of a sudden you're Tom Hanks on Castaway, and you're finally leaving your island. That's how it works.
Uh,
So I think it was last week, we talked about a protocol for, I guess it's kind of aerobic development slash pacing, maybe.
mhm.
It was a 90-second interval with a 30-second build-up for every 30 seconds. You would build up, um, capping it off at an 85 to 90% effort. So it was 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds with a 30-second rest, and it started off at 5 sets. And our hypothesis for that one was, this is kind of to kind of get you into an aerobic environment and stay in an aerobic environment. But Scott, you got a chance to dabble in this, as did I. What were your thoughts on
Mhm.
how it felt?
Well, yeah, it was a little different than what I expected. Now, I didn't have a pre-test, max RPM for 30 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
but I've done enough work on the Airdyne and assault bike. I used the assault bike that I had a rough idea, and I took it down a bit just because I haven't done much cycling or
Yeah,
that
yeah,
type
yeah.
of
So you
type of
factored that in.
thing. I factored that in. I still overshot a little bit in the end, but um, well, things I learned. I didn't like the 30-second rest because it was gone almost
Yep.
instantaneously. Um, but with that said, I definitely for me felt a little spicy a few in. Like I could definitely feel, the anaerobic processes for me,
Mm.
which is more of my natural go-to.
Yep.
Um, but with that said, I also, even though I didn't like only 30 seconds rest very much, that first 30-second work interval that was 75%, I believe, um, actually felt pretty good.
Yeah. That's
And I
surprisingly easy,
like
huh?
surprisingly easy, yeah. And then the second one, by the end, it was starting to get there a little bit, but
Yep.
then 30 seconds was always doable. It was a little suffering, but the suffer score was on the lower side. It just felt more anaerobic than I thought going in, and I
Yep.
did back my RPMs a little bit, just
Yeah.
relative to where I'm at, and
Yep.
so I think I really enjoyed the pacing, the learnings you could get from pacing. Like I might want to play with a variety of RPMs and effort levels and
Yeah.
see what leads towards sustainability. But yeah, what
Yeah.
what uh, what were
Very
your thoughts?
interesting. Yeah, that was actually something that I would kind of pick up on as well. Is how to make those RPMs as easy as possible. So tinkering around with just technique or breathing or tension allows you to kind of isolate exactly what you need to do in order for you to elicit or hold that pace.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing was, like you said, the 30-second first one was fine. The back half of the second 30 seconds started getting spicy, especially because in your mind you're like, I got to go harder than this for 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
So I was holding like 65 RPMs and then ran around 69. And then I was trying to get it up as high as I could, like literally, like without bearing down. But I was getting into like the low 70s. So let's say between 72 and 73, right? For that last 30 seconds. After the 30 seconds, going back into the next 30 seconds, I felt like I could do it. So I think that's also part of it as well, probably, is like this idea that like after a hard effort, you don't need a complete rest to get back to submaximal efforts, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I guess in a way you could almost conceptualize this to be a minute on, minute off, let's say,
mm,
with just a prescription to accelerate over the course of the minute work effort. And I highly suspect that would have felt a lot worse than this did. I think this the sort of I don't know that the first 30 seconds of work is really active recovery necessarily. It is
yeah.
work, but it actually felt like active recovery, and I think allowed the aerobic system to be, more involved. I think
Mm,
in
yep.
the higher intensity efforts.
Yeah, so this week I got a chance to try a little bit different protocol. Um, it was actually a 90-second interval, so same idea, but this was a progressive um, build where the protocol, you're supposed to start off at your 10-minute pace for assault bike. Obviously, we're talking about that. So then every 15 seconds, increasing until basically that 95% of aerobic ability. So 15. So there are 6 steps to it, and it's almost like what do they call it? Not a step test, but like have you ever seen like the
Yeah,
VO2
it
max
is.
testing? Is that called
Yeah,
step
it is
test?
like a step test. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
So basically, it's like a step test, and again, it leads to ideas in pacing. But I think the biggest thing that I kind of found was this was a lot easier to build. Those 30-second intervals, holding that kind of pace for that long, especially the second one, maybe even the third one, was a lot more challenging there than it was on these ones because you're only holding for 15 seconds. So maybe it was psychologically, you're like, okay, it's only 15 seconds I got to build. Then I can just take another step up. So bearing down into those, like that last 30 seconds, I think was a little bit easier than doing the week before. That being said, maybe last week's training led into this week. But
Yeah.
this protocol was 90 seconds of work, 3 minutes of rest, and then 10 sets.
Oh, okay.
And
So
then
90 in 3 minutes.
with a halfway big rest of 8 minutes.
Okay, block rest in the middle. Yeah.
Yep, block
So
rest in the middle.
was and was 100% considered the average of your pace on a 10-minute 300 FY basically.
Exactly. That's where you started it. That's where you start your first step. So for me,
Okay, so the first 15 seconds are the
first
pace you
15
can hold
seconds
for
was
10 minutes.
Exactly, was about 66, 67 RPMs for me. And then just and not huge jumps from 15 seconds to 15 seconds, like maybe 1 RPM. And then by the end of it, you're holding about 72, 73 RPMs for that last 15 seconds. But the other thing that I noticed is how I can actually feel the threshold. You know what I mean? Like I was teetering on that threshold because of that pre-fatigue, like we talked about before.
Yeah.
And then you're like, all right, I got to go a little faster. And you feel almost like the musculature and aerobic system kicking into another gear to get you up to that next 15 seconds.
Like it. Yeah. Interesting. Well, I will definitely I'll toy with that one too. Give me something to mess with here.
Exactly. It's just tinkering around, right?
Yeah, I suppose I should test a 300 FY, which would be.
Oh boy, Scott!
I haven't done it since the old Aerodynes that we had, which I held on to last year because I had all the
from
data was off those monitors, and I didn't want to switch necessarily, but now we don't have them, so I have to.
Speaking of which, I don't know if you saw this on Instagram, but Danny Nichols is doing a little bit of training, it looks like, down in OPEX in Scottsdale, and he did a FY 10-minute test on the assault bike, and I believe got 267 calories. Jeez. That is savage.
Oh.
That's so savage, and he can't be training like like he used to in terms of the volume and stuff. But this must be like a pre-test to kind of see what he's doing to get back into it. Meanwhile, like Danny's no young chicken anymore. He's probably in his late 30s now.
I would think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he was like 35 when he was actually on like the games teams with
With
Marcus.
Marcus and yeah.
What was that? Some gym? Tommy's gym?
T-
TJ's gym.
TJ's was
TJ's
yeah.
gym. Yeah, TJ's gym.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I mean, he's got to be in his late 30s now. So obviously, aerobic ability isn't affected nearly as much as some other aspects of power. But that's savage. 267 cals. I think like Mike McGoldrick and like Travis Mayer getting like the 240s on that test. That is insane. 267, and he's a big boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's a big
How
boy. He's
that
a big,
correlates
powerful boy.
with the old Jim Jones, Bobby Maximus, one of the guys that popularized that in the first place. He got 400 on
Yes.
the old.
Yes.
I wonder how
What
that
I want
compares
to,
there.
yeah. I want to say James was actually referring to because my buddy Ian was listening to James talk about it in a podcast, but was saying that he has a hockey player who gets close to 300 on the assault bike.
Wow.
It's the most powerful person he's seen on the assault bike, hockey player. So you're looking at a big guy who just can put out just serious RPMs.
Yeah.
That's just savage.
Yeah, sustained power, man.
Speaking of TJ's gym, news in the CrossFit world, this is probably something that we kind of hit right last week, I want to say, or something like that. But the but the change and update to the teams at the CrossFit Games were teams of two guys, two girls. We had people moving across the country during the off season, yada, yada, yada. And all of a sudden they dropped this bomb on the CrossFit community after the Invitational in Australia. So people woke up the next morning in the Eastern Hemisphere or Western Hemisphere, and all of a sudden they have teams of two now instead of teams of three. Scott, how does this change the game?
Yeah, it's going to leave a few more out in the open, unless they're not taking more teams.
I don't think they are.
I don't think so either. I haven't heard it either way, but that means there's a third of athletes that would have been at that level suddenly are not. So the competition goes through. Yeah, I feel for the people that have moved across the country to join gyms or even have made big sacrifices within the area. I mean, I know, like our Power Plus team in the area is Fort Vancouver. By no means does everyone live near the gym that trains there and is on that team. They'll put in some miles, and suddenly that might all be for naught.
I know. But, I think overall what it, just looking at the surface, because we're going to learn more and more about this as teams start to form, as the competitions and the events start to be released. But right on off the bat, you kind of can think about, one, you have less competitors. So I believe that's going to be easier for the average fan to follow 2 and 2.
Right.
So, that's always been my gripe about the teams. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. They're going there. They're going here. Why are they waiting? What do they have to – it's just too complicated. I think by simplifying it, you can actually create cooler events and actually do something closer to what the individuals are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense?
I could totally see those benefits, yeah. Not to mention you don't need quite as much gear in some cases, maybe.
Yep. And sometimes, I don't want to watch the worm. It's boring. I don't want to watch the worm. It doesn't give me. I don't care if the worm weighs 400 pounds, 500 pounds. Give me something that I can look at and I say, okay, I kind of know what that's like. Get little miniature cars out there and have them flip them or something like that. You know what I mean? I want to see something that I know, wow, that's impressive. And that's one of the reasons why World's Strongest Man is so impressive, is because you look at they're literally flipping cars, or they're picking up a stone that weighs 400 pounds. And you could be like, wow, all right, that thing is enormous. Or, they're deadlifting huge truck tires and that kind of stuff. You have a sense of what those things kind of weigh. When you look at the worm, you're like, should this excite me? I mean, I know they're still going to use the worm, but...
Yeah, I was saying there should be a shorter worm now, but yeah. But yeah, no, if you've never picked it up, and I've never been on a team that's used the worm. Most of us haven't, even of us that been around a while, and it's like, well, I'm sure it's hard, right? But
yeah,
what is it really like?
Yeah, exactly. Even in the warm-up areas, you don't even have the worm. The only time you get to touch the worm is when you're on the floor. So the advantage is literally the team that gets to buy a worm.
Mm-hmm.
So
Totally.
if you don't have a worm in your gym, you're at a severe disadvantage. So you got to bite the bullet, spend God knows how much money on a worm, and then maybe you can have a potential of going to the CrossFit Games. So number one, we have the idea that like less people on the floor, a little bit easier to follow. The second thing that comes to mind is that now the prize money is a little different. So if they keep the prize money the same for the teams, then it actually pans out a little bit more profitable for the teams that make it, right? Because you have a third less athletes on the team, so it makes it
Yeah.
maybe a little bit more sweeten the pot a little bit for them
Swings
to
up
do it,
will
right?
also, yeah, a little more financially doable too, because I know that it's a huge expense to get a team and
Yep.
support, especially if it's a cross country or even overseas trip. So
Heck yeah.
that will actually maybe ease the burden a tad bit on some of the gyms that make it.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Also, I would say the burden financially for not that it really matters all that much because I know that Rogue and Reebok, probably just give a lot of the equipment and stuff pro bono. But for their end of it, they're like, all right, well, we could take that money and maybe we can reinvest it into some cooler equipment or specialized stuff or whatever it might be. Take it to the next level. Don't just take that stuff and put it in your pocket. Let's make what we have even better than it was before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, change is, it's kind of where it's at,
Yep.
so keep evolving. And I agree that, it's more spectator friendly,
Yep. The,
borrowing some things that I think Grid sort of did, and made spectator friendly,
Yeah, and the
and
invitational looked very grid-like, which is
that's
which is
totally what I
exactly.
thought.
I think eventually everything has a purpose, and I think awesome, great. The grid served its purpose. I think it's going to be very much more grid-like. Um, the new team, CrossFit Games team. So I think that's awesome. And you know what, Grid, you did great, but hang it up. Like there's no more room for you in this town anymore. So it was fun to watch, but I think at this point it's the CrossFit Games has solidified the idea that like all right, we've listened. It's and we're going to respond in a way where this is a lot more spectator friendly. You don't have to watch a team go across a football field with a bob. We can make this much more functional type fitness, so something that you can actually watch. Now, the third thing that I saw was, or kind of came to mind for me was, now you have teams that you really can have a super team. You can have a Dan Bailey and a Josh Bridges along with two stellar regionals type athletes, or even like outside. Like, I mean, if you make it to the games, I think you're just going to want to keep going to the games. But if you have those regional athletes who are in the top 10 but never going to kind of break through, that's probably where you're going to get it, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's going to be like a lot more competitive. I think it's going to be a lot better athletes, going into those teams. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I think absolutely, because now it's hard to get a collection of six all relatively high level and relatively equal in ability.
Yeah.
Three men, three women, especially three females usually, and this will make it a little easier to have four really high level, semi super team. And I think it's going to be largely people that are regional level individuals, but just can't get those top two or three spots to actually qualify. So then now you're on a team, and so we'll see higher level people on the teams than even we have.
Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking of even is when you have like the 2 and 2, so it's two athletes, female, two male. One of the things with the 3 and 3 was that you had kind of like specialists. You had like really strong guys. You had really small girls who were great at gymnastics. Now you're going to have more balanced athletes overall.
Yeah, you'll be even less able to hide somebody somewhat. I mean, it's been harder these last few years for sure, because everyone's had to, they've come up with all kinds of creative ways that you can't necessarily hide someone. But now it'll be just another level of everyone having to be great at everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think we obviously have had that progressive build in terms of the overall athletes, but just think about like if they do have to do something like the worm, you have to have like equal sized athletes, because like if you have like a 4'11" girl and your guys are 6'1", they're literally not doing anything.
Right. Yeah, that's true. You will have to even think about that. I mean, we've seen teams that do have a pretty large disparity
Or the
between,
uneven
but with
deadlift type stuff.
that's another one. Yeah. Yeah.
So some things to think about there.
We had the partner clean and jerks in the Northwest region back when each region kind of picked their own
Yeah.
WODs, you know? And yeah, I know our team, we had a tall person who was actually a competitive Olympic lifter paired with a very
Wow.
short person who was a CrossFitter.
Yep.
And that was an interesting crooked bar semi-band
Yep.
Olympics.
That's those are the days, Scott, where different various regions. Now, speaking of that, that's actually something that they came out with as well. I believe they condensed the entire Canada, so there's no East and West now. So,
Right.
new CrossFit region. I think they condensed a bunch of them.
I wonder who we're paired in with then, if because Canada West and the Northwest has been since they did the super regionals, a few years ago.
Uh-huh.
We've been combined, but if they have Canada East and West, I'm assuming there's a one Canada regional now.
Yeah, so I don't know what they're gonna do with.
So we must be paired with some. I'll have to look. I didn't catch that.
Yeah,
If we're
so
paired with like Northern California, maybe.
maybe so. There's we'll travel this year. Yeah, we'll have to look a little bit more into that. We don't fact check here on the Conversations Fitness Wellness podcast, but we'll have to look a little bit deeper dive into that toward next week. But I think that's probably a good place to stop there for this week, Scott.
Yeah, we'll check out the distribution of the regions.
Exactly, and we'll talk a little bit more about where that's going to go. Got anything else there, Scotty?
I think for now that's good.
Perfect. Okay,
Go
well,
try and warm up.
yeah, man, get on a rower. Salt bike blowing in your face isn't a fun thing.
Oh, yeah, that's fun.
Okay. Well, I'm Sean. You can get me at Sean LaFlock. You can get me at Sean at CrossFitDelrabeach.com. Scott?
Scott Agnes, Scott at CrossFitPortland.com.
Beautiful, Scotty. Stay warm, brother.
Yeah, stay dry, I guess,
Yes.
non-humid.
Thanks, dude. Later.
All right, later.